Welcome in, everyone, to the live stream of Fly for Footy's Fallout. Matt Baker with Santiago Beltran. Santi, how you doing tonight on Sunday Night Soccer version of Fly for Fallout?
Yeah, Matt, doing great. Still in San Diego, so it's been a while since we have been in different places. But hey, we had to talk about a scoreless game, but that's what was given to us. But hey, I have to see the positives. Like team hasn't lost. Obviously, a
Yeah,
lot of things to improve, but we're gonna talk about it.
yeah. We're gonna talk about it. There are some positives. There's some silver linings for sure. When you have a clean sheet, when you start off 2 games in a row with a clean sheet, there's silver linings. Gonna give it a second for folks who want to join the live stream, and then we'll get started. We always tell each other on games like this, we're gonna keep it short. Um,
Right.
I tend to think that the keeping it short tonight is going to depend on how chat takes this, because if we get questions that we need to address, we'll probably have to address them. But you know, there's only so much you can say about a game like this.
Yeah, especially when you get that XG point one or something like that. That's crazy.
Yeah, I think it ended up less than 0.1.
Less than point one. Wow. Yeah, when I saw that on the screen last night, I was like, oh wow,
Yeah.
really?
All right, you ready to get going with the pod?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Welcome in, everyone, to Flyover Footy. My name is Matt Baker, joined as always by my friend in soccer, Santiago Beltran, for another Flyover Fallout and another goalless draw to look at. Match day 2 is in the books for St. Louis City SC, and we have the 0-0 draw at San Diego FC to open Snapdragon Stadium to MLS play. Santi, you were on the call. You saw the game like I did. How are you? I know you're broadcasting from San Diego still, so you're joining us from San Diego. I made the trip back early on Sunday, and so I'm at the comfort of my home studio. How is it out in sunny SoCal so far?
Yeah, still enjoying the nicer weather here in San Diego. We'll be here until tomorrow. Yeah, we didn't get a win, but at least the team didn't lose, didn't allow any goals, which is one of the positives. Defense is looking really good. So I would take that, but obviously I know there are a lot of concerns about the offense. But I think when you start without losing, without allowing goals, it's easier to improve from there.
It's true. One of the things we're going to talk about in a minute are the 3-word reviews that folks give Stuart Holgren when he posts these on X and Blue Sky. And one of the 3-word reviews that stood out to me is defense wins championships. So if you're
Yeah,
looking for a silver lining to take away, and as we start to recap this game, I think that's where you have to start and kind of stop. Defense wins championships. So Santi, do you want to start like we usually do and dive into our starting 11?
absolutely. Yeah, we didn't get the starting 11. We were expecting something else, but yeah, let's take a look at it.
It was definitely an interesting one. We're also seeing a little bit of a trend in, we don't always understand every nuance that goes into the starting 11 because there are other factors at play that we're not aware of. So it's not till post game where we find out what's going on. And this starting 11 was no difference. We're starting to see a trend from Olaf Melberg. The starting 11 for St. Louis City going into this game saw Roman Berkey in net, Giannis Horn, Henry Kessler, and Kyle Hebert as the left center and right center backs. Conrad Wallem made his first start for St. Louis City at left wing back. Edu Leuven and Akil Watts were the central midfielders. Thomas Totland was the right wing back. Marcel Hartl, central attacking mid. And our forwards were Simon Betcher and Cedric Teuchert. Olaf said post-game, and I'm going to get this out of the way, that Cedric Teuchert had 45 minutes in him. So this seemed like more of a prescribed, if he's going to get 45, we're going to start him at 45 and deal with the sub at halftime, because that gives you a lot more flexibility and ability to adapt at halftime. And I think we saw that pretty well. So the sub at half was definitely prescribed. And then to me, the other noteworthy things were that Giannis Horn moved in from left wing back to left center back. Timo Baumgartel was battling an illness for this one, and so it wasn't a surprise that he wasn't in the starting 11. I saw the biggest choices in this match at left wing back and right center back, where the choice was to put in, was basically to sit Josh Arrow. Whether you started with sitting Josh Yaro or you start with we're putting Conrad Wallem in the starting lineup, however this ended up being the conversation, Conrad Wallem was the choice at left wing back, and you keep Kyle Hebert on the field, move him to right center back, and the odd man out in this whole thing is Josh Yaro when you insert Conrad Wallem into the starting 11. So right there, what were your reactions, and kind of how did you see that starting 11 progress?
So right off the bat, I expected probably a change or two. Just having Chucky Lozano on the left wing. My initial thought was there may be some adjustments, and maybe Josh Jarrow won't be part of the starting 11. What was really surprising and maybe refreshing for me was seeing Janis Horn as the left center back. He did really well, and from all the games he has played, he played left. He played on the left side on a four-man line, and at times I didn't think on the attacking side he looked very comfortable. But I think yesterday, playing as a left center back, he looked really good. I
Mhm.
really like what I saw from him, and maybe that's his position going forward.
I told people before the game started that I saw enough of Horn in the attack last week against Colorado that I was okay with him still doing that. There wasn't anything that was concerning. It wasn't anything exciting necessarily, but there wasn't
Mhm.
anything concerning. The ball went through Thomas Totland, and I think as much as it did go through anyone in this week's game, it still went through Thomas Totland a little bit more. But I agree. I think we're going to get to Giannis Horn plenty, but the work he did to neutralize Anders Dreyer was
Mhm.
remarkable. I will shout his praises until somebody tells me to shut up, because that work was magnificent. I think he does have a home at this left center back spot, and this may be a sign of things to come when you get Conrad Wallem in here. He's on loan. Lutz wants to play him. He kind of has been seen as the answer to left wing back, and I think we saw plenty of him in the attack comparatively. We didn't see plenty of anybody in the attack, I suppose, but
Right.
he did have a lot of line breaking runs. He was pushing high with the ball. And he had a few times where he had the ball in the attacking third in the corner, and he was making 1v1 moves towards goal.
Yeah.
Things that you want to see out of your left wing back. So it would not surprise me if this is Giannis Horn's new home now that Conrad Wallem is here and it seems like he's ready to go.
Yeah, and Walem, yeah, although there wasn't a lot of on the attacking side, Walem definitely shows some glimpses of what he can do on the attack. But I was really satisfied with Horn playing as left center back, and maybe we will see him there more often than not.
Yeah, and if you have him cemented as your left center back, you would think after 2 games now you have Henry Kessler cemented as your central center back. The things are kind of falling into place here, where your ideal center back grouping of Horn, Kessler, and insert one of Hebert, Baumgartel, or Nielsen could be a potential look. Not to say that Olaf's not going to mix things up depending on matchups and fitness and all that, but two clean sheets in a row with this performance. Giannis Horn as part of that defense, I want him there every single game as far as I'm concerned. But another fascinating piece to the starting 11 is we did not go into this with a full bench. There were
Yeah.
only seven players on the bench, and that was Klaus, Chris Durkin, Alfredo Morales, Celio Pompeu, Timo Baumgartel, Josh Yaro, and Ben Lund. And we found out per Olaf Melberg post game that this was a result of City 2 earlier in the weekend. Tomas Ostrak, Michael Wenzel, and Joey Zielinski participated in a City 2 match earlier this weekend, and as a result, were unavailable for this match. Now, the knee-jerk reaction from a lot of people in hearing this is, what are you doing prioritizing City 2 ahead of your City needs? And that's a valid knee-jerk reaction. It might even be a valid continuing conversation to have. I have 2 thoughts on this before I turn it over to you. First off, I think there's value in getting these guys minutes, not unlike we're going to see later in this season, where you have those who don't play for City will play for City too. In this case, it's early in the season, and you don't want some of these guys to just sit. You don't want Tomas Ostrak to go 2 games plus without significant minutes. Michael Wenzel, Joey Zielinski, they're not going to see a lot of time for City, and so you get them minutes early with City 2 in this friendly or whatever they had going on. But also, Olaf still used 5 subs. And we're going to talk about how he used them in a bit, but it didn't seem like, and it seemed intentional too. So you send Ostrak, Wenzel, and Zielinski. It seemed like there wasn't going to be a plan to play them. So if you think about it from that perspective of you're not taking guys away from your lineup necessarily, you're just trimming the fat, so to speak, where you only have 5 subs. He knows exactly the depth chart, which this is another conversation where we are kind of seeing this fall into place where Morales and Durkin are obviously those central midfield top choices, along with Watts and Leuven right now. And Salio comes into the attack. Klaus comes in the attack. Now you have these options, and you're starting to see how this depth chart shakes out.
Yeah, and I don't see anything bad with it. Like taking 2 more guys just to take them, knowing you're not gonna use them. Give them minutes with CD2, especially Tomas Ostrak getting back from injury. I think getting those minutes is important for him. Better than sitting on the bench for 2 games and not even having a chance. So yeah, if you know what your game plan is and what guys you may use, especially early in the season when you may need some of these other guys to get minutes, I don't see anything wrong with it. It's more like an extension of preseason for some of these guys, get them more minutes on their legs, and
Yep.
when their number is called to play with the first team, at least they had some competitive minutes. So nothing wrong with it. Yeah, and you can say, oh, but what if somebody else have gotten injured and maybe the guys you had on the bench weren't the right guys for that? Yeah, it's a little bit of a risk, but I don't see anything bad with giving these guys more minutes.
Okay. We're going to shake things up a little bit as we go in this show. I mentioned it's going to be a little briefer of a show, ideally. We're not going to go dig into first half, second half, shot by shot blows like we typically like to do with big moments for obvious reasons. I don't think there's not much to talk about, and I don't think anybody really has that level of detail that we need from this match. But I do want to, before we get into our 3-word reviews to help frame where the fan base is, and before we go into our overall match highlights, I wanted to talk about Snapdragon Stadium itself. Now that we're in the thick of it after the starting 11 and the bench, Santi, what did you feel about, I guess, the atmosphere that you heard and saw at Snapdragon Stadium? I was there. I saw the pregame festivities. I thought it was fun pregame festivities. They had one of the big banner on the field. They had fireworks. They had some sentimental videos about San Diego entering the league. Don Garber was there, the whole 9 yards. But we would be remiss, and I kind of just want to get this out of the way before we go any further. We would be remiss if we didn't at least address or mention what happened towards the end of the game. And in a lot of ways happened throughout the game, and it just wasn't addressed in any way, shape, or form until towards the end of the game. And that was the PA announcer, the stadium boards displaying the acknowledgement of the chants that were occurring in the stadium. What I think 95 and 99, anyone with common sense, in my opinion, would say is the homophobic chants and slurs that we hear typically at Mexican national team games. That has now found its way to MLS and was part of the opening of Snapdragon Stadium. In the stadium, you could hear it loud and clear throughout. And when they finally addressed it, they addressed it in rapid succession towards the end of the game. And in the moment, you get the sense of what's happening, and you see that there could be a reality where they show this sign on the video board 3 times, and they say the match will be abandoned very loudly and clearly to the crowd. But in retrospect, you realize that it was happening throughout the game, and they waited until the very end to address it. So kudos from me in addressing it, at least bringing it up in the stadium. I do have to wonder if this was more of a covering your own, what, so to speak, covering your, in that they said it and now they can say they said it, but ultimately nothing really came from it because they didn't abandon the match. And then one further thing to that I was frustrated with is the lack of acknowledgement from the broadcast while still riding the heels of the incredible fan base, the atmosphere. I think there's an obvious disconnect that fans are aware of that kind of cuts into your credibility as a broadcast team and as an announce crew if you're not going to at least acknowledge that the fans in the stadium have been warned that this match may be abandoned. I think you're doing a disservice to those who are watching on TV because they hear it. I heard plenty from fans that they heard this on the broadcast. And so I was disappointed in Jake Zivit and Taylor Twellman for not addressing it. I was disappointed in MLS and the producers for not bringing it to their attention, or at least allowing them to address it, because may not have even been on them, Jake and Taylor. There's a production team that kind of talks them, lets them know things to talk about, gives them points, tells them heads up. They could have been directed very clearly not to say anything. So before anybody goes jumping down Jake and Taylor's throats about this, that may not be the full story. I just want to add that as well. But I walked away from this pretty disgusted that I was actually attending an MLS match where this happened.
Yeah, that's not a good look for San Diego. And first, even though I'm in San Diego, I wasn't at the stadium. Unfortunately, we San Diego didn't give a space to any of the away radio crews, so I ended up having to do the match in San Diego, but not from the stadium. But yeah, it's a bad look for San Diego, and yeah, they address it at the end. But I think it is too late, even if it has been, if it had been going on for a good portion of the game. To be honest, I didn't realize until later when I saw the post on social media, because when I'm doing an away game, I'm watching the TV, but I'm watching it like muted. So I didn't notice any of this until I saw people posting on social media about it. But yeah, it's not a good look for a new team. First game, home opener. Hopefully they address that, but they have to do better for sure.
Yeah, and we'll see what ends up happening. San Diego has another home game against the Columbus Crew here coming up, so we'll see from that fan base, that perspective, that match, what ends up happening, if anything. And we'll see if MLS addresses it on any level coming up. Let's move into the match, though, Santi. Instead of going, like I said, blow by blow, let's hit on our good, let's hit on our bad, let's hit on our ugly. Let's start with the good. Let's get the good vibes going just a little bit. And the good has to start and, like we said, stop with the defensive work. We did a remarkable job in a lot of different ways in neutralizing any danger that San Diego actually had. You look at the stats at the end of this game, and it ends up with 15-2 in shots. So you could cherry pick some stats that make it look like our defense was just doing a terrible job in allowing all these shots. They were allowing San Diego to possess the ball 72% of the time, which remained consistent the entire game, and that plus 70% possession to San Diego. But when you get down to it, San Diego, and we experienced this in match day one, the disappointment of 18 shots and no goals. San Diego's final stat line, 15 shots, 1 shot on target, less than 1 expected goals out of 15 shots. And that was with possessing the ball over 70% of the time. As exciting as San Diego might have seemed to a lot of folks, and I tried to pour cold water on this last week when we previewed San Diego. As exciting as they seemed against the LA Galaxy, because they were new, they were stringing passes together, they were possessing the ball well, they were creating opportunities. I think this kind of reinforces that there's a lot of bark, but there's not a whole lot of bite behind the San Diego offense, and especially when Chucky Lozano has to exit the game 31 minutes in due to an injury. There were opportunities that Chucky had, and I think Kyle Hebert did a fantastic job in defending him. So, like, Lozano had to leave the game after 31 minutes, and we give a lot of credit to Giannis Horn for neutralizing Anders Dreyer. I got to give at least some flowers to Kyle Hebert for his work, as well as Henry Kessler, their work against Chucky Lozano. Because my visual vibe of this whole thing is that, yes, they possessed the ball a ton. We struggled mightily. We're going to talk about the bad. But when it comes to the defensive side, their wingers were neutralized. They got into the final third. They were carrying the ball, but I never felt concerned. Like, Chat City Tactics on X, Michael had a great comment that I felt and told my wife in the moment in the game, where you're getting this crowd go crazy for all these times that they're getting into the attacking third, the excitement of carrying the ball into the attacking third in the channels and in the wing areas. But I never got upset. I was just never concerned because there never was this trailing player. There was never an open person. There was always a numbers advantage by St. Louis City in the defensive third, in the penalty area. And so you had the 1v1s working. You had Kyle Hebert taking on Chucky Lozano. You had Giannis Horn taking on Anders Dreyer, and there was really nothing else after that. St. Louis did a fantastic job of neutralizing that second pass, that open man in the box that just was never there. And so, yeah, San Diego spent a lot of time. The heat maps, the passing charts, they show a ton of passes inside and into the final third, but nothing ended in danger. The one shot on target, the massive number of shots that were blocked. St. Louis had 9 shots blocked, 41 clearances. The defense did a remarkable job in their defensive third, making sure that no matter what San Diego thought they had and ended up doing in possession, it never led to anything dangerous.
Yeah, I will just give the credit to the work St. Louis did defensively. They knew San Diego had some threats in Chucky Lozano and Dreyer, but they were neutralized really well. And yeah, I felt the same way. Like St. Louis defending well, even though San Diego had the ball a lot in the wings and in St. Louis final third, like they weren't creating any danger. But I will give the credit to the defense and the way St. Louis basically set up the game and the defense. I think St. Louis read the game really well and knew what weapons San Diego had. So credit to St. Louis. St. Louis showing great, solid defensive work. Obviously, we're worried about the offense, but the way the team is playing defensively, like it's just hard to score. Even it's hard to create chances against this team. And if you think about last year, the amount of goals the team allowed, this is a big change, and it's great. Yeah, you have to build offensively from these great performances, but the team is showing a really solid defensive foundation, and credit to all of Melberg and the coaching staff for setting that up and choosing the right players. But last night, the fact that San Diego wasn't what people saw against LA Galaxy, credit to St. Louis. Yeah, San Diego has a good squad and has some good players, and yeah, they lost Chucky Lozano early in the game, but still, I will give the credit to St. Louis.
At St. Louis, we're seeing kind of, I don't know, an evolution in this City 2.0, because I don't want to refer to what we saw this weekend as a low block, but it had some really eerily similar vibes to a low block. And I think partially because San Diego did do a good job of stringing together their short passes. They did a really good job of keeping the St. Louis press at bay. And so St. Louis wasn't as, I would say, aggressive in forcing the issue. They weren't stretching themselves. They weren't playing outside of themselves. And that's kind of becoming a hallmark of this Olaf Melberg system is if St. Louis initiates a press in our final third or in the middle third and it doesn't work, they're willing to drop back just a little bit, cut off the lines, make sure that they're taking care of the second and third passes as opposed to trying to immediately turn the ball over from whoever the ball carrier is. And that leads to some of these crazy numbers like San Diego had, where passes into the final third, they outpassed St. Louis 51-12. Passes in the final third, so once they get to the final third and passing the ball around, 145-16 from San Diego. San Diego had 145 passes in their final third, yet they only managed 1 shot on target. That tells me that the St. Louis defense was dropping back pretty significantly, but they were taking away the spaces. The number of blocks, the number of clearances was magnificent. And the average line of engagement by this St. Louis team, I had to refresh this stat to make sure that I actually was looking at it right, because I think it might be the lowest in the history of St. Louis City SC. And if not the lowest, then one of the top 5 lowest or bottom 5 lowest. The average height of defensive actions by St. Louis City, which is usually in the mid 40s, upper 40s if you're looking at a high press working, low 40s typically, 32.05 meters. This was at that defensive third line, and that was their average height of defensive actions, meaning when they initiate or go for an interception, a challenge, a clearance, a recovery, a block pass, or a tackle. the penalty area is littered with these defensive actions. And I think if I count it up, I see around 12 or so defensive actions in the attacking half side of the field. It's kind of a crazy number to look at. Yeah, it's less than 15. And that's not the hallmark of a St. Louis City team that we're used to. So you can look at this from the defensive side as St. Louis knew the assignment based on who their opponent was, and they played accordingly. And so I don't have a whole lot of problems with the approach tactically by the defense because they mitigated everything they need to. And one of my takeaways from these two games so far has been St. Louis is very clearly putting an emphasis on not allowing goals more so than they are forcing an issue of trying to create chances. They're not sacrificing the defense to take any kind of a chance in the attack and leaving themselves stretched too thin, stretched too wide, or anything like that. And this does have, if you take a step back, this has an aura of sustainability behind it. Because if you can make sure that you're defensively stout in this way and you're doing it match over match, then you just have to figure out how the accompanying attack will come with that. You don't get outside of yourself. You have a true to yourself game plan defensively. That is a foundation to build on. But we need to build on this pretty quick because we cannot keep drawing these games and God forbid we actually lose one of these games. We can't have that happen. But defensively, yeah, the last things I'll say is we only allowed that one shot on target and it came at 40 minutes from Anibal Godoy off of a corner kick. So if you look even at the run of play, we didn't allow a single shot on target. And that's marvelous given the amount of passes I just mentioned in the final third, the amount of possession they have. And that shot on target was a 0.05 XG. So it was borderline harmless in statistical terms. And it came 2 minutes after an Akil Watts shot. So it was just they earned a corner and had that one shot on target. Flowers again to Henry Kessler, showing his captaincy of that back line. I think Henry Kessler is my player of the year so far through 2 match days, as small a sample size it is. But the stat from the club that they sent out about Henry Kessler is that he led all players in defensive actions with 15 total, encompassing interceptions, blocks, tackles. And the stat that I liked is he had 100% passing. Because as we transition into the attack, and I'll let you speak anything else you want to on the defense, as we transition into the attack, one of the issues that we have is the passing.
Yeah, Kessler definitely becoming the leader of that defense. There was a little bit of a void last year after Tim Parker left, but Kessler showing that he can be the leader of that defense. And just thinking a little bit about the lines of engagement and St. Louis maybe looking like a low block, I think part of it is what San Diego was bringing. San Diego also did like the lack of attacks by City and the lack of chance creation was also a nature of the way San Diego was defending and not letting St. Louis advance and recovering the ball like midfield. And I think the defense was very disciplined instead of having guys trying to force things and maybe make a run they should not make. The three center backs and even the wing backs stayed in the line and didn't risk it, knowing San Diego was difficult team and that they were very quick when they recovered the ball. So it's part of what the game brought to, but obviously City needs to figure out a way to get better offensively. But yeah, I don't think we're gonna see a low block every game. It's more part of the circumstances that the game brought.
Well, as we transition to the attack and what ended up being an unmitigated disaster, one thing that we have to note in the statistical look is San Diego's average height of defensive actions. While St. Louis was stuck in about 32 meters, San Diego's average height of defensive actions was a good City press height. It was 45 meters. That's closer to midfield than it is to where St. Louis was in their defensive third. And it was a pretty good press. You have to call it a pretty good press. So credit to San Diego for the success that they had in limiting the ability for St. Louis to play the ball out of the back. And that was, I think, the biggest thing is San Diego knew St. Louis is a blossoming team in trying to work the ball out of the back. They had seen the tape. They had heard Roman Berkey talk about how they weren't able to get that done in match day one because of field conditions. Field conditions may have been an issue in various ways at Snapdragon because we know that that field has history. But I think overall here, San Diego's press did a lot to limit and mitigate the attack right from the get-go. When we look at goals added, one of my favorite stats on here, along with PPDA, goals added that measures how much each touch by a player changes their team's chances of scoring and conceding across 2 possessions. It looks at 5 different types of stats. It looks at shooting, passing, receiving, dribbling, interrupting, and fouling. So 6 stats. So all categories, everything you do with the ball. And so if you receive the ball from in an advanced position, you're going to get a higher goals added. If you receive the ball closer to your own goal, you're going to get a negative. Shots, passes themselves, sending the ball up the field, all those different things. The goals added leaders for St. Louis were Henry Kessler, Kyle Hebert, Conrad Wallem, Giannis Horn, Thomas Totland, and Akil Watts.
Your back 5 and then your defensive midfielder.
Yeah, that's not a recipe for success when shooting is one of the categories of goals added, I'll tell you that. Simon Betcher, Edu Leuven, Klaus, Durkin, and Toyshirt are the next few. Marcel Hartl and Celio Pompeu are even further down from that. And it speaks to a lot of things. So I don't want to make it seem like this speaks to the shooting aspect of it. I also think it speaks to the passing and receiving in how we can look at what happened to the attack. Matt Doyle on Blue Sky had a really good, quick video highlighting a couple sequences that show issues in how St. Louis chose to pass. Even when they had space to do the passing, they were a little more timid. They didn't want to stretch the lines as much with the ball on the ground. And so you're getting more Marcel Hartl coming back to the ball, or a player holding it up and then playing it back, trying to play it back and forward again to I guess, change where the defensive players are, as opposed to trying to immediately break a line or be aggressive with the ball. And then when we did, we had players overlapping on each other. There were multiple players to me that I saw that occupied the same space way too many times. If you look at the heat map of this game and you look at specifically Cedric Toyshirt and Simon Betcher, which is the first 45 minutes for our attack, oftentimes they were in the same spot. So there was issues kind of in responsibilities of who was going where. At times you saw wingers and forwards kind of make the same runs. I think Doyle's specific example had Conrad Wallem, and I think it was a Simon Betcher run where they tried to occupy the same space from a Marcel Hartl pass, and that just doesn't work for anybody. So you're making these mistakes you're making mistakes yourself. You're kind of shooting yourself in the feet on these approaches. And that's on top of how St. Louis was able to handle the press and work the ball out of the back. The handling of the press was poor. So you had a good one by San Diego, poor management by St. Louis. In the defensive third, we had terrible ball progression overall, which ended up having too many balls sent long. And so you're trying to make runs by our wingers, and you're getting into a situation when you do send the ball long and you're not able to progress the ball meaningfully through the midfielders or by the center backs. You get into situations where you're trying to create these dual scenarios, which San Diego doesn't like. So I applaud them for doing something like that. But at the same time, you weren't able to take advantage of it. So you send these balls long, you get into these 50-50 duels. You've got a Thomas Totland or a Conrad Wallem out there, and there's nobody to support them because your lines are so far back. You're having one guy make a run or 2 guys occupying the same space that the ball's taken before then. No matter what ends up happening, whether it's a ball on the ground to 2 guys occupying the same space or a ball over the top to 1 guy making a run who doesn't have support, you're putting yourself in bad positions where you can't recover the ball after that. San Diego's numbers are too much for that player who made the run. All of your other guys, your 7, 8, 9 outfield players, are still back in your defensive half. And so I've got issues with ball progression in a lot of those different ways. And that's not even counting yet the midfield. I could go on in that. But when you see ball progression, when you saw what some notable things, either playing it out of the back or otherwise, what comes to mind to you and what you did or didn't see against San Diego?
Yeah, midfield was absent for a big portion of the game. But again, I give San Diego credit because they handled the press really well and didn't really let City have the ball, and they will. As you mentioned, their average height of defensive actions. Yeah, it was basically midfield, There were multiple times where City couldn't progress the ball past midfield, and San Diego will recover and try to create something. City will have a clearance, but then San Diego will recover it again, like on City's end of the field. So yeah, a lot of things to improve on the offensive side. Have to connect better between defense and midfield to have a chance of creating meaningful actions. But there is time, and yeah, obviously, 2 games. It's like one of those things. Okay, we haven't allowed any goals, but we have also not scored any goals, and that's worrisome for a lot of people. But it's easier to work on those things when you don't lose, and maybe people
Mhm.
will have like flashbacks to last year when the team first 5 games, 4 draws and 1 win. But it's still early, and maybe against LA Galaxy another chance to maybe continue improving. But just give it 3 4 games, maybe another home game, see what the team can do in 2 weeks. But yeah, lots of things to improve, especially on the offensive side. But I think part of the issue, Conrad Whalem first start, so
Mhm.
maybe the chemistry is still not there. You mentioned Simon Becher and him occupying the same space. At times it's just repetition and more training sessions, and if Whalem is going to be that like win back, I think over time you will find that chemistry, and make sure you don't occupy the same space as your center forward.
And it could just be a symptom of the inability to progress the ball. Like Cedric Toyshirt, Simon Betcher are both players who are not necessarily ball hawks in the box. They don't just sit there, but they need service. And if they're not able to get that, then they have to get outside of themselves to come back to the ball and try to play in different spaces. And they were trying to do the same thing way too many times. Looking at the stats for Cedric Toyshirt in 45 minutes of play, yeah, he had 6 total touches, touched the ball 6 times, and he was 1 of 4 in his duels. So when you're progressing the ball, if the only way you're able to get the ball primarily to your forwards and to your attacking third and your high wingers is by sending the ball long in the air primarily, or even trying to split the lines from your center backs, and you're having a 1 of 4 duel rate, that's not going to get the job done. And it's also not leveraging a guy like Marcel Hartle in getting the ball into the attacking third. So that and it could even come back to a problem in the midfield itself. One thing we saw on match day 1 against Colorado is that our center backs were trying to split the lines by sending the ball long with long passes. Kyle Hebert did this a lot. Even Yarrow they were taking space and they were moving up. So they were kind of almost bypassing the midfield to try to get the ball up to Hartle and up to the wingers themselves. And that just not only was it not working well in this game, but it further exemplified my problem with what our midfield is doing in our attack, which is not much. Mentioned the goals added just a little bit ago by Watson and Leuven, but Edu Leuven kind of seems a little lost in this system right now. Like he's being covered up by some of the center backs in what they're trying to do and progressing the ball themselves. And by the wingers being the focus of progressing the ball into the attacking third. And it seems like he's getting lost a little bit. And that's a problem when your best ball progressor is not able to do what you're needing from him. So I've got issues in what, and all of that does go back to just an evolution of this system, right? You've got the foundation of the defense. So that's there. That's the thing we have to build off of and be excited about. You have to figure out what's going on with your midfield. You have to figure out other options for progressing the ball when you're facing different teams. I don't expect the LA Galaxy to be pressing like we saw against San Diego. But I also think that you have to be able to manage this in different ways. You have to be able to understand if you have a pressing team, how you're going to play them in this formation. If you're not going to switch out of the formation, if you're not going to change your overall tactics, then you have to be able to adapt to what the other teams are giving you. Haven't seen that yet for the attack. And, we could go on and on about individual performances or lack thereof in the attack, but I don't really want to beat a dead horse on that front. I will say that even in the second half, when you started making those subs, you did see a little bit of a difference in the approach. Like when Klaus came in, Klaus and Morales at 61 for Betcher and Leuven, you did see a little bit more propensity for Klaus to be moving to the left side And when Salio came in as well, Salio was also moving more to the left side, opening things up a little bit on those sides. But the most interesting sub that we have to talk about real quick is Chris Durkin. When Chris Durkin came in for Cedric Toyshirt, the intention per Olaf Melberg at halftime, we mentioned Cedric Toyshirt was on a minutes limit, 45 minutes. Olaf Melberg said post-game that the intention was for another midfielder to further help control the midfield battle. And it seemed like Durkin took on more of an attacking role as a dual 10 with Marcel Hartl ahead of Edu Leuven and Akil Watts. In defense, it didn't really change. It kept things, even keeled. So defense was fine, but offensively, it just didn't move the needle any. And so I don't know if that type of a change to the shape or a type of a change to the approach where you see something that you need to work on and you go for it, but it didn't really do anything. I guess the best I could say from the Chris Durkin sub is that Olaf identified something that was a big problem in the progression of the ball and a big portion of the field that they were losing a battle with. And he made a pretty sizable change to try and address it. So from a head coaching perspective, like you could argue, Olaf Melberg did exactly what we want him to be doing as a head coach, which is identify this big gap, this big issue that we're seeing in the first half and not wait until a 60, 70-minute sub to try and make a personnel change to address it, but be very intentional. You take off a forward and you put in a midfielder to try to own a spot that you're losing. Credit to Olaf Melberg, and I think the fans are going to like that kind of tactical approach where he's not waiting to pull the trigger and he's willing to take a gamble, like putting in Chris Durkin for Cedric Toyshirt, just 1-for-1 sub. That's a pretty notable change that I don't know if Bradley Carnell or John Hackworth would have been making those kinds of changes. So I do have to give credit to Olaf in that regard.
Yeah, that's refreshing to see he's willing to make adjustments early on. When I saw Chris Durkin was coming in, my first thought was like, okay, Durkin is gonna play with Akil Watts, and maybe that will release Leuven. Maybe he will go more to that role of a number 10 that we have seen him at times.
Right.
But obviously, Durkin was the one doing that, and I'm sure the team will continue like making adjustments to that, and maybe at times we will see Leuven. But you also have to think like Leuven and Watts have been working well defensively the first two games, so maybe the choice this time was Chris Durkin, but maybe another time we could see Edu Leuven more in that number 10 role, which was what I expected when I saw the substitution. But yeah, the fact that Melberg identified there was a need, there was a gap, needed to get more control of the midfield and made the adjustment after the first half, something that at times the previous 2 years came at times too late or never came, even though everybody knew that an adjustment was needed. That's good. Yep. And that's good to see that he will do that. I'm sure he will also at times do different formations depending on the opponent. So it's good to see that from your coaching staff.
Agreed. And we saw some changes in the subs made as far as players moving over. Kyle Hebert moving, Josh Yarrow coming in for Conrad Wallum. The biggest, most exciting thing, I think, one of the few exciting things to take away is we got to see Celio Pompeu play a game again. This was Celio's first game since June 14th, 2024. Wow. Yeah, so he's back. He got minutes and he did have some dynamic movements. He had a scary moment where he kind of went down and we were all kind of worried about him, making sure he could still get up. But he's good to go, and exciting that Celio was a part of that game. I think that some of the other player notables, I mentioned that Cedric Toyshirt only had 6 touches. This follows the goals added where the most touches in the game. Kyle Hebert had the most touches at 53. The absolute low number of touches in general. Hebert had 53. Totland and Berkey both had 49. Giannis Horn and Akil Watts had 43. Kessler, Hartl, Leuven, and Wallum follow from there. Marcel Hartl only had 68% accurate passes, which was a problem. You have to be able to string together better passes. But I think that leads to just the underlying issues that we're talking about with the attack is players need more familiarity and comfortability in where they should be going and what their assignments are when they face different tactical approaches. We have the defensive structure in place. We have to start building on meaningful work in the attack. And it's been such a hot, cold start to the season where you start with 18 shots and then you go to 2 shots. And so you can say that this may be something to work on for a team that plays a pressing team like San Diego was on us. So that could be the first thing you note is the different style that Colorado offered. But just the consistency in creating the number of shots and then finishing them eventually. That has to happen against the LA Galaxy. Santi, anything else on this San Diego match before we look to see where St. Louis goes from here?
No, I think when you have a scoreless draw and offensively you don't create much, there is not much to talk about. Again, credit to the defense, and the team will build from these defensive performances and start figuring out the offense, and just a good opportunity against an LA Galaxy that is missing some pieces. Maybe get the first goal of the season, and why not the first 3 points?
Absolutely need the first goal of the season. Absolutely needed at Dignity Health. And so because now we have 2 draws, St. Louis sits tied 10th with Colorado as the only 2 teams in the West with no wins or losses and with 2 draws through 2 weeks. St. Louis is also now one of 4 teams to not have scored, one of 3 teams to have not allowed a goal, and is the only MLS team to do both through 2 weeks. So that's a notch in our hat, I guess. Some kind of unique thing we can hang our hat on. St. Louis has a full week of rest now and will stay on the West Coast. Do you know if the club is actually staying in California? Because we hadn't received, as of the time we're recording this late Sunday night, we have not received word if the club's coming back to St. Louis.
I don't know. I was hoping we will have some information by now. But the fact that it's a Sunday game, I would say maybe not. But we'll see.
Yeah, it's a lot of flying either way, but we'll see. We will get that information out on Flyover Footy socials when we have it. But either way, they play the LA Galaxy next Sunday night soccer at 6 p.m. Central. Galaxy just lost to Vancouver this weekend. It was a 2-1 Sunday afternoon match in Vancouver. So they lost this match. They have a midweek Champions Cup match on Tuesday before they welcome City to Dignity Health Sports Park next Sunday for the MLS match of the week, Sunday Night Soccer. We're going to have a full preview of that later on this week. Santi, we usually try to close with a little look around the league. Any notable matches? Because there's a couple notable matches this week. Miami just got done defeating the Houston Dynamo 4-1. Philadelphia, Bradley Carnell's Philadelphia Union is now 2-0, having scored 4 goals again for the second time in 2 weeks. They've got 8 goals through 2 games. They beat FC Cincinnati, a perennial powerhouse now in the East. You had Salt Lake beating Seattle 2-0, Charlotte beating Atlanta 2-0, pouring cold water on their attack. SKC lost again, this time to San Jose. Again. This time to San Jose. San Jose showing themselves to be a completely different team from last season and now 2-0 themselves. Any other games stand out to you from this weekend?
The main one for me was Philadelphia. Great start for Bradley Carnell. 8 goals in 2 games. Doing really well. We'll see if they can keep it up for the whole season. But that's a great start for Carnell after getting an opportunity at coaching again with Philadelphia. When I think about it, like, it's great to see somebody like Carnell doing well, and I guess Philadelphia was a good fit for him. But yeah, to me that was the most notable when I was getting ready yesterday for the broadcast, since it was a late game for St. Louis. I was able to watch pieces of some of the games, and to me the most notable was Philadelphia winning, and also seeing a Sporting KC loss for the second time in a row.
Absolutely. And now all we need to do is get in the win column so we can actually have something to tout. It was a fun week of MLS. It was another week of City Soccer. We hope to have more goals, more excitement to talk about. But we've got a foundation to build off of, and we're going to be here again multiple times a week for the season, for the rest of the season, covering it all. So stick with us, Santi. I think that's a good note to end it on. Thank you for joining us here on Flyovers Fallout, looking at the 0-0 draw against San Diego FC. And we look forward to joining you later this week, looking ahead to the LA Galaxy next week. For Santiago Beltran, my name is Matt Baker. Thanks for joining us, and go City.
Vamos City.
All right. Thanks everybody for joining us on the live stream. Happy Sunday night.